Welcome to my Only One Outlier podcast show, where I'll be exploring the data science career tips with the industry experts who can share their experience and journey with us. I am your host Nirmal, from a new grad to an early career data scientist, from a data analyst to a data engineer, or anyone who wants to start or transition their career into data science. We will bring you all the do's and don'ts to help you guide in your data career path. Hello everyone, this is Nirmal. I'm currently hosting a podcast show called Only One Outlier with a very special guest today. And actually I wanted to do an intro in his style. So let me try, right? Okay, I'm not good. My voice is a little low, but I'll try my best. And he does really well. So, but let's see. Today I have a very special guest who is no other than Josh from the StatQuest. Hey, hooray! I think I did well. Bam! Yeah, that's
you did great. You did
need
fantastic.
To add the bam.
I
Yes.
love it. Oh, I love it. That's the best.
Yes. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I think his voice you have probably heard so many times. I have myself. He runs the YouTube channel StatQuest. If you have not heard about it and you are in data science, there's something wrong. You should go check it out. He has 1.21 million subscribers. From simple linear regression model to building the transformer from scratch, right? So, I mean, that's a wide range, and it's phenomenal that you have been dedicating time and efforts to the community. I do join a lot of your live events, every video you have come built so far is so precious. So I'm fortunate to have you. So let's welcome our guest, no other than Josh Starmer. Welcome
Hooray.
to the show. Yes,
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yes, I'm very honored. I sent the messages to a few folks that I really wanted to bring on my podcast. And then it's just like sometimes you just have to send the message without thinking anything. The worst can happen is they are busy. They can say no. But in my case, he is managing time. So I'm very happy and glad you are here. All right. So before wasting any time, my audience probably wants to hear more from you. So I would start with giving the floor to you to introduce yourself, like who is Josh Starmer, so people may already know. If not, then it'll be a good way to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hello, I'm Josh Starmer. I have a YouTube channel called StatQuest with Josh Starmer, where I try to teach data science concepts. It started out as me trying to teach statistics, and it's branched into machine learning and AI and data, like data manipulations and basically all kinds of things that I generally describe as data science topics, but that's what I do. I've been doing it full time for a little bit over 4 years, but I started the channel probably 8 years ago.
Oh, wow. Been a while. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's a lot of good information. So if you have not subscribed yet, go subscribe to StatQuest. You won't regret it. There's very good information. Like I said, I was in the school doing my master's for data science. And then I was like, there's a lot of information online, right? Sometimes it's really hard to filter what is good for me, what is not. So, I mean, there's good signals, there's noise. So you need to figure out, because in my experience, when I was focusing on learning something, if there's so many information to me, I'm kind of lost, right? So what I did was I wanted to kind of like list, okay, what are the good resources I can do for stats? What is the good resources I can do for ML? What is the good resources I can do for Python? So, and then obviously I suggest everyone to start from foundational concept. Statistics is what you need, right? Like, I mean, you can build fancy models and all, but without the stats, you're not going so far. So, and at that point of time, I came across your channel and then I started digging into it. The best part is the explanation. So how were you a teacher before, or what was your background? That's my question, right? So you're explaining things is a very, very good.
Yeah, so this may surprise you, but I've actually never taught a class before. I've never been a teacher. So this is something I've just sort of made up on my own.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so my background is I have a PhD in something called bioinformatics, which is basically statistics applied to genetics or biological data sets. And I worked in a laboratory, a genetics laboratory at the University of North Carolina, at Chapel Hill, and I worked there as a postdoc. So, and a postdoc is a kind of like a career purgatory type position
Mm-hmm.
where you're not really a professor. It's not that you're not a professor at all, but you're not a student either. You're sort of in this in between space.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this job, and it was really fun. For me, I was the only person who is sort of the expert in sort of doing things with numbers. And everyone
Oh.
else in the lab were experts in doing sort of genetics experiments, and they were really good at it. And what impressed me was how much work they put into their experiments. These people were basically the hardest working people I've ever been around. They worked all the time trying to get the data that they would then give to me to analyze. And what I realized is that if these people are going to work so hard for their data, uh, I had better be the best statistician I can possibly be. I may not be the best statistician, period,
Mm-hmm.
but within my limitations and my abilities, I need to be as good as I could possibly be to be worthy of their data, basically, because they worked so hard for that stuff. They came in on weekends. They stayed late at night. They worked crazy to get the data that they were giving me, and I wanted to like treat it right. So I started taking statistics really seriously. I'll be honest, before I worked in this lab, I wasn't a huge fan of statistics. I didn't really like statistics. It was tedious and very confusing to me. And to be honest, what I was really hoping I could do when I joined this lab was not statistics, but I could do sort of a computational modeling of biological processes, like simulating sort of how molecules would interact with each other and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was imagining I would do that with partial differential equations, which sound very fancy and very complicated, but are actually infinitely more simple than statistics. And so I was really hoping not to do statistics, but it turned out that what they really needed was someone to do statistics. And so I had to learn that stuff and be good at it. And so that's sort of how I got my start and in statistics. And then what I wanted my coworkers to do, I wanted them to understand what I'd done, and I wanted them to know that what I did was the right thing, but not just like me tell them something like I just did the right thing. I wanted them to like walk them through the process so that they fully understood what I had done and why I had done it, what my motivations were, and what the results were. I wanted to walk them through all that and have them understand it. So that's actually when I kind of started learning how to teach statistics, was when I was
Oh,
trying to
wow.
explain what I did to my coworkers who were definitely not statisticians. And I mean, I didn't like statistics to begin with, but these guys hated statistics. It's like taking it to a whole nother level. And so, they made all kinds of career choices to avoid it at all possible. And so it was a little, I learned a lot trying to teach these people. I did statistics with their data, and I learned a lot about how to communicate to people or non-statisticians and people with other backgrounds. I was interacting with a bunch of physicians. I was interacting with all kinds of people at different levels, and so I learned a lot in the process. As a result of doing all that, I worked in. Sorry to ramble, by the way, but
No, it's okay.
I worked in an academic lab, and in this academic lab, there were people kind of coming and going all the time, and so it's sort of like I was faced with the problem of I could teach people basic statistics every 6 months, give them a little short course or whatever, or I could make my life a lot easier if I just put my little lessons on YouTube. And then when someone new came to the lab, I could say, hey, we're going to be doing some statistics. I've got these YouTube videos that help explain the techniques so you can understand what's going on and what I've done. And you can you don't have to watch them right now, but whenever you need to watch them, whenever you're confused, you can watch it then. And if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, just come in and say, hey, your video is terrible, and I'll try to do better. And so that was sort of the origin of StatQuest, of me really just trying to, again, just teach my coworkers and using YouTube as a way to get myself out of having to teach people all the time. And I was like, I could just do it once, and then I
Yeah.
never have to do it again.
Yeah.
And so that was a big appeal of YouTube. I wasn't really trying to get people to watch my videos. And as a result, I developed some peculiar habits. Because I thought I was just talking to my friends, and my
Yeah.
coworkers. And so that's why I started like coming up with these goofy intros because I thought it
Oh,
was like
yeah.
hilarious and I thought they'd laugh. And I started saying bam and things like that. I thought I was just doing it for my coworkers. And I developed these habits, which I've continued to this day. And I guess are sort of what makes StatQuest. But I did it without the assumption anyone is ever going to watch my videos. So
Oh,
I didn't.
wow.
It's a little weird now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's awesome journey. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Because the best part was the data to motivate you because
Mhm.
you mentioned that folks are doing the hard work, they are doing the heavy lifting to bring the data. And yeah, I think that's some motivation that data analysts, data scientists should have it is some of the analytics work you're gonna do, right? It's gonna make the data valuable. It's gonna make that data stand out. It's gonna make that data speak for itself. So I think that's when I also sometimes find myself like, hey, as a data scientist, right? So I do a lot of cleaning work and myself as well, but people who are helping me to build the pipeline, like bring the data and make this analytical storage platform, whatever we call it, to understand data, like the raw data. I mean, it is there, the insights are there, but without we do proper uh, processing or build a model on top of it, we cannot make sense of it, right? So I love how you started like, hey, people were collecting data, and that was making you motivate that as a statistician, I mean, you better do a good job, right? So
Yeah.
that was cool. Then the other part I like was, yeah, you explaining to the co-workers who are not from the technical background. I think that is where I think when I also mentor or try to teach, to the folks, I always find it very interesting to teach to someone who's not from technical background. From the technical background, I think it's easier the way you explain concept. To break it down is the hard, right? So I think that is why I can now tell that from coworkers to everyone in the world is learning the same way from Josh, and I think I love it. So thanks for
All
sharing
right.
that.
All right. That's great.
Yeah. And I love the band thing, right? So please continue that. I think it motivates us, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes learning can be boring. With that, I think I have a perfect segue to ask you a question about your
Yeah.
book, and
Yeah.
which I also bought it, and then it is very, very good book,
All right.
because it's fun, right? So that's
Yeah.
why like we will bring the fun aspect to the learning now.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with those characters, right? So I forgot the name. If you can highlight the
Yeah.
name, right? So, and it's amazing, like how you kind of create and mix that, right? So it starts with that, right? So
Yeah. So I've got two characters
yeah,
in my book. I've got this one guy named Norm, and that's short for Normalsaurus. He's a
okay,
dinosaur with a Gaussian shaped back.
okay, yeah, yeah,
And the other guy is named Stat Squatch, and Stat Squatch and Norm talk to each other, and they talk to me, and they actually serve sort of educational uh, purposes, specifically in that I don't know how familiar you are with like Greek philosophy and like ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Socrates and all those
hmm,
people. They often, when they would write an essay trying to explain something, and they were trying to explain sort of what is meaning, what is knowledge, what is, these really kind of like abstract concepts that were really difficult to kind of wrap your brain around. And one thing they
absolutely,
would do when they would try to explain things is they would make it a conversation between someone who knows a lot and someone who sort of acts like they don't know anything. And the person who acts like they don't know anything is always asking questions and sort of propelling the thing. It's like, well, you said this, but what about this? Or, and it helps sort of like make learning more like a conversation and less more just like a lot of information coming at you. I think it's almost like this StatQuest. I mean, excuse me, not this StatQuest. This podcast.
right,
This podcast is an interesting conversation, and people will listen to it
yeah,
because it's just an interesting conversation. And I wanted to make learning statistics and kind of learning data science the an interesting conversation and a story that was told but among characters.
yeah, yeah. I think that works. I think it actually brought my memory back of reading the comics when I was growing up, things like that.
Yeah.
Like you have characters, and then when they talk, and you sometimes remember characters, not the things they
Yeah.
say, and then you can relate back, right? So that in that way, I think it's always fun. So
Yeah.
I love the idea.
Oh, hooray.
Yeah, hooray! So actually, I like this. We should keep saying it after every conversation we do. So now let's like we talked about the success, right? Like today, like you kind of serve so many people to improve their knowledge in stats, things like that. So, but every path has challenges, right? I want to touch a little bit about what were your challenges and how did you overcome when you were growing the business, right? I think this might help the early content creators who is trying to build their YouTube channels, and then so it might be helpful for them as well.
Yeah. So, I guess, so when I started out, I had a full-time job, and I was actually, I loved that job. I was happy to be in that job, and I had no sort of aspirations for YouTube. I mean, it was fun having a channel, and it was fun uploading things, but I was just happy where I was. I didn't need to do anything else. But it did become sort of it became a bigger part of my life, and a bigger passion. And it was basically, I would go to work and I would do work. And any time I was not doing work, I was working on StatQuest because it was something I was really excited about. It was fun watching the channel grow. But it wasn't making really any money. And at that point, I think my boss sort of realized that, like, two things were going on in the lab. Unfortunately, was for various reasons. Maybe it's not unfortunate, but for many reasons, the lab was actually shrinking, and so there were less people for me to help with their data analysis. And on top of that, I'd already taught them how to do all the data analysis, and so they could do it on their own. And so there wasn't a whole lot of need for me. And the typical career trajectory of someone in a postdoc position, which is where I was, was you start applying for grants, you get funded, and once you get some funding, you can start applying for sort of tenure track faculty positions at universities and research institutes. And that's what normal people do. And I tried to write a few grants, and I was terrible at it. And I actually, not only was I bad at writing grants, but I was also like the grant themselves scared me. Like even the thought of say, like, I was successful, and like maybe I'd gotten awarded all this money, that actually stressed me out rather than making me happy. That made me, the thought of success made me very stressed out, because when you write these grants, you sort of set up a plan for the next 4 years of like what you're going to do with all your time. And I would write this grant and be like, this really isn't what I want to do with all my time. I mean, it's something I could do with all my time, and I'm capable of doing, and I'd probably learn a lot of cool things.
Right.
But what I discovered was I really wasn't interested in doing my own research. That was kind of like boring to me. What I really liked doing was helping other people with their research. I thought everybody else's research was way more interesting than my own. And so writing grants was like really scary and intimidating, just because I didn't want to have to do my own research. And if I got this grant, then I'd have to. And then I'd be like, oh, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is help other people. And so when the lab was shrinking and people already knew how to do, and I do what I needed to do. And so I wasn't really helping anybody in the lab. My boss talked to me one day and he said, look, you're not really helping anyone in the lab. You need to either write grants and get funding, or you need to move on. And I was like, that's true. And so I quit 2 weeks. I left 2 weeks later, and it was super sad. And it was really intense. I cried a bunch because I really did love that job, and I was secretly hoping to have it for the rest of my life. But it was also very scary, because right now, at that point, I did the math, and I was looking at how much time I spent doing StatQuest, right, and how much money I was making. And I was basically making less money than somebody who bags groceries, which isn't really enough money to make a living and support, pay off your rent and buy food and all those things, and occasionally hang out with your friends. And so I was like freaking out, right? So how am I going to make money with YouTube? And at first, And I think a lot of people do this. I've been told a lot of people do this. At first, I was like, oh, I got an idea. I will do consulting. And consulting's kind of fun because it's a way, I like helping people and it's a way to help people. And so I did a little bit of that when I first started off. But what I really wanted to do wasn't consulting. What I really wanted to do was StatQuest. And so I had to stop consulting because if I did consulting, sure, I'd make enough money to pay my rent and buy my groceries, but I wouldn't be doing StatQuest, so the whole idea was to do StatQuest. So I stopped doing consulting and I said, okay, we're going to figure out how to make this work. And one of the things I did that helped out tremendously was I started making these PDF study guides, and I would do sort of online workshops on how to code something in Python or something like that. Mm-hmm. And by doing those things, all of a sudden financially I was making enough money. Not all of a sudden, it still took another 6 months, but I had some savings from my last job. So I didn't need to be making enough money right at the beginning. It was more like about 8 months. After about 8 months, I was making enough money just to get by. I wasn't making even half of what I'd been making before in the lab.
Yeah.
But I was making enough to get by. And that was huge, just to be able to achieve that. And in the process of making these study guides, I'd make these little PDF study guides. And what they were is little like 5 pages to explain like linear regression. And I drew, all these little cartoons, all these pictures, and I made it like a comic book. And in the process of making this the study guides, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I could write a whole book like this. I don't just have to do an individual like topic. I could do a whole 300-page book or something like that. And that was really exciting once I realized I could grow these study guides to a full-size book and put it all together. And that was transformative because I'm actually a terrible writer, and the whole idea of writing scares me. But when I turned it into making a big, huge comic book, it went from being scary to being really fun.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how all that evolved from my previous job. It wasn't, it was all just sort of, what could I do that people, would be helpful, I guess, is ultimately what was driving this. I really just wanted to help people.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I think there are a lot of early career content creators out there, right, who's trying to. And then you really brought up a good point about some sort of like even to have a digital product, like maybe guidance, reference, like some sort of PDFs that is very informational, and you can have a small price tag to it and then make something out of it, at least get you going, right? So initially, I think those are challenges because if you quit a job or doing something as a full-time, I mean, obviously, initially it's going to be challenging and hard, right? So to manage some expenses, like the basic expenses, and it's good. I remember, you had those PDFs, and I remember buying a couple of them myself as well.
Oh, thank you.
So for sure. And I'm glad to find out that in those hard times, it was helping at least with something, right? So I kind of feel good now.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, every penny counts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then awesome that actually led you to the idea of writing the whole book, right? So, which is also good. That is the reason why I also tell people, and I did this mistake myself as well, like keep constantly sharing the content on LinkedIn, but if you just start your own newsletter, for example, or something, then you have all those with you as well. I mean, obviously LinkedIn allows you to download and everything, but sometimes we don't go through that hassle. Like you forget what post you made, what post was a good that people like. With time, you'll forget about it, right? So, but if you maintain your own some sort of documents with you, then later on you can evolve it to something more tangible, like a book, like you said. So that could be one idea for the folks who's writing, and just keep it for yourself as well. And newsletter is usually a good idea to do it too. So you have everything on your record, right? So whatever you have written so far. All right, so let's switch gear a little bit here. So I want to see, I love asking these questions because every tech is not complete, in my opinion, without blending the life, so because we all work, we all have our life on the parallelly. We're running, like someone is a father, someone is, like a husband, like all those different role plays we do, right? So how do you balance your technical side, right? So you have to probably ramp up your skill,
Yeah.
continuously learn about what do I post next, right? So one thing is you have to be very high scale demand for tech side. At the same time, your own life, right? So
Hmm.
how do you balance it, your personal life with the tech?
Well, early on, it was super easy because I basically quit my job and then the pandemic happened. And
Oh
so
yeah.
there was no need to balance anything. It was just, I just worked all the time. I woke up in the morning and I just worked all the way till night every day. And so that was super easy, but also exhausting.
Exactly.
Um, how do I do it now? That's a great question. Now, it's funny. It's still not a normal like 9 to 5 job. I still work in the evenings and I still work on the weekends and things
Mhm.
like that. But with the pandemic over, I like having friends over for dinner, and so I like to cook. And so I have every Monday night, I've got some friends that come over for dinner. Every Saturday night, I go and I cook dinner with my old boss, the one that
Oh
fired
wow.
me. We have dinner every Saturday night, and we actually we get together a couple times a week. We get together Saturday night and we get together Thursday nights, and it's just nice for me. It's just nice to have these sort of like, I don't know, get-togethers with friends. To me is super important. I just, every chance I get, I if I'm not working, I'm with my friends.
Yeah.
Is the way I like to be.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. I mean, obviously, and I'm glad to know that you still hang out with the bo boss you
Yeah.
fired you. That was funny, but and
Yeah.
obviously because relationship stays longer, right? Than job or role. I mean,
Yeah.
that what matter. So yeah, I think even I tell or suggest other folks myself as well is like you have to take a break, right? Or
Yeah.
at least figure out how to blend it, right?
Yeah.
So how to mix it, right? So if you just keep that the technical hat on and then keep moving forward, I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard because at some point of
Yeah.
time you will need that break
Yeah.
for your mental sanity and it will revive yourself, I believe, right? So because
Yeah.
yeah, so all right, so that is the personal side of Josh. We get to know that you love to cook as well. So
Yeah.
you don't only cook the statistics, but you cook food as well.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, my channel, if you go way back,
Okay.
is all cooking videos.
Oh wow, that one I didn't know.
It before it was StatQuest. It used to, I changed the name to StatQuest with Josh Starmer, but it used to just be Josh Starmer, and I
Okay.
used to just post cooking videos. And
Oh
so
wow.
cooking's always been like a real important part of me, and I wanted to share cooking stuff. And then it just turned out that nobody really cared about my cooking videos, but everybody really liked my statistics
Stats,
video,
of course.
which I think is interesting, and I'm totally fine with, as long as I feel like I'm helping somebody, whether it's with a recipe or with doing data science. That's satisfying for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that there's a lot of similarity too, right? Like
Yeah,
you building the recipes for learning, right? So and of course your
yeah,
final
they're all
meal,
algorithms.
yeah, yeah, final meal, whatever you cook could be your
Yeah,
model or someone is
yeah,
building it, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
all right. So the other topic I had is basically any personal story if you haven't shared across or if you already have shared in other podcasts or channels, but maybe I haven't come across anything interesting that you wanted to share is like, hey, especially this question is geared towards helping the people who is very early in the data science career. For example,
yeah.
what is there anything that you can bring your life example, like incident as an example or something that can help
Oh
people to
yeah,
get motivated? Because people, I feel like
yeah.
data science is very vast and stats is a major piece of it, but like people are sometimes getting lost, in this ocean.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that really helped me.
Yeah.
And part of it was my father. He was always, he's very into curiosity. He's
Hmm.
always being like, a lot of my new videos start with this thing called where I go, this stat quest is brought to you by the letters A, B, and C. Always be curious. And that's actually for my dad. He never said A, B, C, always be curious, but he'd always be like, curiosity is really important.
Right.
And one of the things he taught me was to be curious is to be a good helper. And to be a good helper, when my dad was a little kid, his dad, my grandfather,
Yeah.
was an elevator repairman. And so when my grandfather would go to work sometimes on the weekends, because an elevator would break down on the weekends, my grandfather would go to fix it. My dad would go with him.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather would always say, Frank, that's my father's name. He said, Frank,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be a good helper. And the way to be a good helper is to know what tool I need before I have to ask for it. Just have it ready, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to, like, instead of my grandfather saying, hey, Frank, hand me the screwdriver, Frank's more engaged in what my grandfather's doing, and he's watching and he's learning and he's going, once he does this, he's going to need the screwdriver. So I'm going to have that ready for him. And what that means, there's a lot of things in this story about being a good helper, but what part of it's curiosity of watching my grandfather and trying to see what he's doing and trying to understand what he's doing. So there's curiosity there. There's also, how can I help? How can I be useful?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the time it takes to ask for a screwdriver, you can actually just pick up a screwdriver, right? So you have to ask. It's kind of like already too late. So he has a way of, like, making himself useful
Mm-hmm.
by being ready in advance. And I've found that throughout my career, I've always been hired for one job, and I
Mm-hmm.
get that job. Great. And the job description says one thing, and that's great. But then when I get the job, I show up and I go, okay, well, the job description says this, but I'm looking around and I see something else that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've been watching everybody work around me and I see what they're doing, but there's this hole of stuff that nobody wants to do but needs to get done.
Right.
So I'll go talk. Sometimes I'll go talk to my boss and go, hey, look, I just noticed that there's this thing that needs to get done and nobody's doing it. So would it be okay if instead of doing what you hired me to do, can I just work on this? Because this definitely needs to be done. And, that's always worked out. Sometimes I don't even ask, though. I just look at it and I go, look, someone's got to do this thing. So I'm going to start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that's helped me throughout my career, because for the most part, no one's ever fired me because I've always been very useful, right? Like,
Yes.
there's the job I was applied for, but it turns out maybe they didn't actually need that. They thought they needed that. What they needed was someone to identify these other problems and work on them. And I think once I started doing that, people really enjoyed having me around, and I was able to be really helpful, but also keep my job and kind of grow in my job, because it wasn't always just the same thing. Once one problem was solved, I'd realize there were other problems that needed to be solved, and so there was sort of like always a lot of variety.
Yeah.
In a single job. It wasn't always just the same old thing every day. And I'm going to be honest, I really like variety in my work. I don't like just doing the same thing every day. So that's sort of, I don't know if that's helpful for anyone listening to the podcast or not, but that's been helpful for me.
No, I think that's a great point. That sometimes we tie ourselves to the job responsibility, or even something that you wanted to do may not be exactly what needs to be done at the moment, and you easily get distracted or feel dissatisfied and turn around your head, So rather you can look at it from a different perspective and say, hey, what if I do this, get this thing done, and then everyone in the team, including manager, will build a different impression of me, that I was coming in the team for something that I didn't sign up for, or it's not even taxed for me yet, but I'm taking initiative to do it. I think that's a great point. I think that's a valid point. Even in my career, I experienced similar situation when the first job I got in Microsoft was a data scientist title, but the work at the data engineering level, because we have to do someone has to do some pipelining work or data engineering work to make the data ready. So particularly data scientists, which I was hired for, can work on things without the data. I mean, I was not able to do anything, right? So instead of waiting more people to come in the team, or at least engineers to come in the team, I picked up some skills myself, started learning few data engineering tools, all the proprietary tools within the Microsoft, and then I started kind of like building the pipeline and bring the data to myself. And my manager was like, wow, you now make your own blocker out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is good. I think this is a very good lesson, and I totally double down on this to anyone who's listening that, hey, try to explore more, be curious. Obviously, that example of your father, like looking for what is going to be the next acts. I mean, he was
Yeah,
already kind of doing the predictive analytics on his himself, like,
exactly, right?
yeah, what is coming next, right? So,
Yeah.
and that always attention to detail, stuff like that helps. Awesome. So we are coming to an end. It was a fantastic conversation, and I enjoyed every bit of it. I'll probably plan on doing more in future. So we'll probably bring completely different topic and focus on that. So anything you would like to maybe like, hey, I didn't cover or we didn't cover, and I would probably have to add this to wrap it up. Is there anything like that? I just want to ask before we wrap it up.
There's always more.
Yeah,
There's
I know.
always more.
Yes.
But I would also say, to continue sort of, what I was saying before, the other thing that's fun about sort of looking around for problems is I know when you're starting out as a data scientist, there's so much to learn, right? There's
Yes.
so many different things. There's statistics, there's machine learning, there's AI, there's, data manipulations and dimension reduction techniques and all these
Right.
things, right? Where do you know where to begin? How these things? And what I found is, when you look for the problem will tell you what you need to know, rather than just sort of like trying to pick things out of the blue and go, well, maybe this sounds cool and I like doing it, so I'll learn more about it. I mean, that's one thing you can do, but I always let the problem tell me what I needed to learn, and that's actually how my channel has migrated a lot from statistics to
Yeah.
machine learning. Was people started asking me questions about machine learning, and I was like, well, I actually don't know the answer to those questions, so I got to figure that out.
Right.
And so it's more like, that's why, it's this organic sort of follow the questions and follow the problems and let that determine what you need to learn.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that is a very great point to end the conversation. And I'll just add one more thing there is I come from security background and we work in cybersecurity problems. And there's a very fundamental concept in cybersecurity is reverse engineering. And you actually said the similar thing where instead of like trying to do all the concepts and trying to understand where it will go fit in my problem in future, you rather start with the project problem and then think backward, right? So from there you can now have, okay, for this particular project, I need to learn PCA, I need to learn, the regression, I need to learn this. So you got the answer, what to focus on,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah. So thanks so much for your time today. I think it was fun, and again, thanks for coming up in the show. And I'm hoping my audience will enjoy it. They definitely will. And then if you have not, again, go subscribe for the StatQuest. There's so many useful information.
Oh,
that
thank you
will
very much.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Take care. Bye bye.